AfriKili family and Global Pack Nation, welcome to another edition of the Global Pack Show. This is Tony Fumusimba. Today, on this Monday, April 14, 2025, we'll go around the Global Pack. So I'm going to do things a bit different today. So I will give you news of 3 regions of the Global Pack, and we'll just go very rapidly, touch upon them so that I give you a good summary of what has happened over the weekend and over the last couple of days, because I know many of you are busy and many of you have an interest to be abreast and see what's happening in different regions. But with life, with activities, the news cycle that's never ending, things can be a bit hectic. So today I'm just going to do a quick summary. So it will be a bit different, all right? So talking about the 3 regions, we will start with the United States of America, where we'll just look at one specific thing. It's reports that have been issued that shows that the boycott that was started by black shoppers who turned their dollars away from Target. You know, we did a show on that last week. Well, a report came out showing that maybe that boycott may have had an impact, because there's definitely less shoppers on stores such as Target. So we'll delve a bit upon that just to discuss that, and then we'll switch over to the Caribbean and look at 3 quick news in the Caribbean. We'll look at Vybz Kartel, who is seen by many as one of the most instrumental reggae artists, even though he's a dancehall artist. So rather a Jamaican artist, maybe since Bob Marley in the eyes of others. In the eyes of others, he could be seen as controversial. Well, he issued a statement this last couple of days, which I think is very instrumental. He was talking about skin bleaching, colorism. And so he decided to turn away from that. And so we'll talk about what is that about? What is this colorism situation about? Then we'll also look at Haiti. The situation is just getting worse, with gangs threatening a total takeover of the nation. And so some statements have been issued by the U.S. State Department and by CARICOM, which is the Caribbean Community Organization. We'll then finish the roundup of the Caribbean by looking at further statements made by the Jamaican government with regard to the reciprocal tariffs that were enacted by Donald Trump, and also just different strategies that Jamaica wants to pursue in order to circumvent that. And then we'll finish by the African continent. We'll look at the election that just happened. We're in the country of Gabon in Central Africa. General Brice Oligui Ngema, who had taken over the country after a military coup d'etat, well, was just elected with 90% in the ballot boxes. We'll see what that is all about. We'll also look at Algeria. Algeria is going through a very tense period with France, where there's some expulsion of French officials. 12 French officials working in the U.S. Embassy were expelled from Algeria. So the tension between Algeria and France is very high as we speak. And then we'll finish with South Africa, where Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, has sent a new envoy to the U.S. to lead negotiation with President Trump. And this is after the U.S. had expelled the South African ambassador, Mr. Ibrahim Rasool. So there you have it. So those are some of the news we'll cover. I will go very fast. So this is kind of something new, this roundup format. Whereas since we began this news, live format, we've been focusing on 1 or 2, maybe 3 max. Today we're just doing a roundup, and then I'd like to get your feedback and see what you think. So there you have it. So that's what we'll do today. Let's fasten our seatbelts. Let's dive in and let's get to work. All right, so once again, AfriKili family and Global Pack Nation, welcome to the Global Pack Show. I'm very excited to have you once again with us today. And so before getting things started, let me start by thanking all of you who are continuing to support this new platform, the Global Pack Show, this live format since we launched it. So thank you very much for all of you that are subscribing to the channel. All of you that are commenting, sending me messages, thank you very much. And for those of you who have not done so, let me ask you to just take a moment. We'll only take a few seconds. If you would please just click on the subscribe button so that you can subscribe to this channel. That will help me tremendously grow this platform, but also it will allow you to be part of the dialogue, be part of this growing community. Without you, we cannot do it. So please take the time to do that, and thank you in advance for subscribing and supporting the channel. All right, a quick announcement also. I am very, very excited about this, folks. Mark your calendars, all right? So this Friday, all right? So Friday, which will be the 18th. So on Friday the 18th, also known as Good Friday, if you are of the Christian faith, something exciting is coming on the Global Pack. So I'm starting a new business series, all right? So here we will review starting Friday and once a week. So every Friday for the upcoming weeks, I will cover a formula to allow anybody, and I mean anybody, to be able to transform an idea into a successful business. This is a proven method. I have used it myself. This is a method taught in some of the best MBA programs around the nation, best universities, going from MIT, Harvard University, Rice University, you name it. This is a proven method. Many of you are too busy, obviously, to go into a 2-year MBA program, or it might be cost prohibitive for many. So I've decided to just come back and summarize that. So I will walk you through those steps starting next Friday. So again, mark your calendars. Starting this Friday, once a week, every Friday, I will come and I will walk you through the steps, which if you follow, I guarantee anybody who follows those steps will be able to turn an idea into a successful business. Proven methods. I've followed it myself, and many people have. There's a lot of science behind it, even though many will tell you entrepreneurship is not an exact science, which is true. Some might tell you entrepreneurship is all about an instinctive approach where you just go with your gut feeling. There's some truth to that. However, there are also frameworks which are very, very helpful that can help anybody, I repeat, anybody, transform an idea into a successful business. Whether you're in the United States, whether you are in the Caribbean, whether you're in Africa, whether you're in Europe, this is a proven method, and businesses that followed it and businesses are very successful. All right, so there you have it. Starting this Friday, the 18th. All right, let's get our show on the road here. Okay. Quick parenthesis also, if you're a fan of golf, you know, the sports of golf, that Donald Trump seemed to love a lot, right? He's always bragging about winning his own golf tournaments. Yeah, Donald Trump organizes golf tournaments in his Mar-a-Lago resort, and he is, I think, is one. I've seen at least 2-3 reports lately where he comes out and say he won his own golf tournament. Well, aside from Donald Trump tournament, I'm talking about the real tournaments. There's the Masters, and so there's Rory McIlroy, the golfer from Ireland, who just won the Masters yesterday. You will ask me, what does that have to do with our Global Pack community? Well, one, congratulations to this guy, because he's been talking about a perseverance. He has gotten close so many times. It's been over 10 years since he last won. He's 35 years old now. Over 10 years of pursuing that goal. He's come really, really close, and even last year to the last moment, heartbreaking. Well, here the thing is, I'm bringing it up because our good friend Donald J. Trump seemed to have jinxed the Masters in a way, right? Since Donald Trump is coming out and he's enacting war against the EU, the European Union, against the world, wanting to showcase American dominance across the board. Well, in his favorite sport, here's a situation where Europeans had not won in a long time. Americans have been on a tear in golf the last few years. And so here's Donald Trump coming, his favorite sport, and boom, the EU, which is Donald Trump started the war versus the EU. Here's a European who's winning at Donald Trump's favorite sport, golf, winning the green jacket, because if you win the Masters, you're given a green jacket. So golf fans, you want to blame somebody? You can blame Donald Trump from for jinxing your sport. So there you have it. Donald Trump, if Europeans won the Masters, it is all on you. I know Donald Trump is obviously watching this show. I mean, obviously because he's very busy, but I know he probably has a bit of time to put on the Global Pack show and watch this show. Obviously, right? So there you have it. Okay, let's move on to serious things. Let's go around the Global Pack. Okay, so let's start with Black Power. All right, or Black spending power in the United States. You would recall back in February, I did a show when the NAACP came up with a list, right? It set up a strategy whereby, so the NAACP, it's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, right? So the prominent African American organization that was created in I think it was 1905 with people such as W.E.B. Du Bois and so on. Well, they came up with a list advancing or highlighting businesses that were still supporting DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that was after Donald Trump signed his executive orders banning, DEI. And so there's some businesses such as Target, the big, the big store, the big grocery or supermarket chain, had decided to also interrupt its DEI programs. And so the NAACP came up with this list. And then you had other prominent figures. If you remember, I had talked about Reverend Jamal Bryant, for example, of Atlanta, who he took it to the next level. He was like, you know what? We will not just boycott, but he called for a 40-day fast boycott, so to speak, which I believe started on March 5th, and which is supposed to end on April 17th, so in 3 days. And so he was like, totally, let's boycott Target and let's show them that them turning their back on us can have a financial impact. And if you recall, my take upon that was like, well, I mean, DEI, yes, there is a component of racial diversity in it, but because DEI encompasses more than just racial issues, I was more of a proponent of beyond boycotting Target and beyond just highlighting other businesses that support DEI. I was more of a proponent of putting forth Black-owned businesses and actually starting a campaign that would motivate and incentivize Black shoppers to direct more of their dollars towards Black businesses, Black-owned businesses. So I'd make that whole case. Well, interestingly enough, there's a report that just came out. Okay, so and that report shows that over the last month, they compared a Target to stores like Costco. Costco is another, big chain in the United States. Well, they saw that Target lost. They looked at foot traffic and other survey reports. Target lost about 7 million Black shoppers, whereas Costco gained over 5 million Black shoppers. So there seems to have been a switch there where many Black shoppers, by flexing their financial muscle, went from Target to Costco, and that has a financial impact. So the report is saying, yeah, the boycott definitely seems to have had an impact. It's a factor, even though there might be additional factors explaining that, but nevertheless, that's a factor. And to me, when I see that, it just reinforces my view that I expressed back in February, right? Saying that, look, yes, Black shoppers, spending power within the Black community is massive, projected to reach upwards of $2 trillion. So we need a better concerted effort and campaigns that on one end incentivizes Black business to really increase their, communication, their marketing, their messaging. And on the other side, for Black shoppers to consciously, right, intentionally seek out Black-owned businesses. And if you remember the point I made back then, this is not like a racist approach or anything along those lines, but we all understand that we have massive, for example, wealth gap within Black people and other communities in the United States, for example. There is massive inequalities when it comes to own ownership, wealth, net worth, and so there's massive wealth gaps in the United States. And these are gaps that were created by policies that were enacted centuries and decades ago. Well, one way to combat that, not the only, but one way, is to help increase the financial, I would say, tide within Black communities by supporting Black-owned businesses, with the idea that as the dollars are circulating more within Black communities, it can help fill in some of the gaps that are currently being experienced within Black communities. And the stronger communities are financially, the more political influence they can exert. So that is the aim here. It's certainly not saying that Black people should not shop in businesses owned by white people. Absolutely not. Supporting Black businesses is good. Small businesses, generally speaking, is good. Supporting businesses is good. But let's also make it intentional, where we seek out Black-owned businesses as much as possible so that we support the cause here, with the ultimate goal being of helping reduce the wealth gap that exists in the United States, because that is something that needs to happen. All right, so this was the news I wanted to cover in the United States. Let's continue with the Global PAC. As a reminder, when I say Global PAC, it's Global Pan-African Community, right? So here we're talking about communities of people of African descent. So we have people in the African continent, which are part of the Global PAC. We have in the United States, we have African American communities, we have immigrant communities, we have second, third generation people of African descent in the United States. Those are all part of the Global PAC. I'm looking at the Caribbean, which is part of the Global PAC. In Latin America, you have countries like Colombia, Brazil, with massive communities of members of the Global PAC, people of African descent. Europe. So the Global PAC englobes that community. So do not be surprised when I cover all these different regions, because there's essentially members of Global PAC communities across all these regions around the world. And ultimately, the mission of this platform, as you know, is to build strong bridges and coalitions across the Global PAC so that we can change the narrative, change the conditions, elevate the Global PAC, and then ultimately we reach a world that is more equal, where people of African descent are able to elevate in the position where they have to be, and then we have a more equal world. All right, so that's it for the U.S. Let's move on to the Caribbean, as I said. All right, so the first story here, it's about Vybz Kartel. Vybz Kartel, who is the Jamaican artist for dancehall, the dancehall type of music. He's 48 years old. He was born, his name was Adija Azim Palmer. So he came out and he was interviewed in New York. But by the way, he's seen by many as maybe the most instrumental Jamaican, or the most influential Jamaican artist since Bob Marley by some. Some consider him to be controversial. He's had quite a lot of legal problems lately. But nevertheless, I was very interested by what he said. So he was speaking this past week on Hot 97 Radio, which is a radio channel. And so he was talking about skin bleaching. All right, so skin bleaching is essentially the process of applying all kind of bleaching creams to make your skin lighter. And unfortunately, many Black people around the world engage in that practice to make their skin lighter, to obviously less darker. But also you have other communities like in India and other places where people that have a darker skin are trying to make their skin lighter. And I will dive a bit deeper into that. But first, let's hear what he said. So as he was speaking on the radio channel, the radio show, here's what Vybz Kartel said. So he said, in hindsight, it definitely had to do with self-love. But on the other hand, while I was doing it, in my mind, my mind wasn't telling me that. Let me repeat, just to be clear. Here's what he said, quote, in hindsight, it definitely had to do with self-love. But on the other hand, while I was doing it, my mind wasn't telling me that. My mind was telling me I am doing this to show my tattoos. I got a lot of tattoos, but looking back, it was just as a black man, something we have those issues. Sometimes we have those issues, but I would never bleach again, though. End of quote. So here's essentially what he was saying. And the interesting part here, I think, is when he was saying, on one end, it had to do with self love. On the other side, he said, look, it was just as a black man, sometimes we have those issues. So what issues are you talking about? And here, this is a message. Look, this goes beyond the Caribbean. Now, Jamaica, if you know the history of the Caribbean, with going back in times of slavery and so on, essentially there's an element of colorism, right? So the lighter your skin was, the more privilege you could have been granted by the slave owners. And that's a mentality. This is where that originated. So mixed kids and things of that nature, the lighter your skin, the quote unquote better you were portrayed to be. So that those were the systems that were set in place. And then you look at other continents like Africa and so on. I can tell you that in Africa also, it is prevalent. At least it was. Maybe I don't know if it's just as big of a practice today, but I remember even in my youth, whereas many people, men and women, would spend a lot of money buying all these bleaching creams to try to bleach their skin to appear more clear. Obviously, here it's the same mindset as colorism in Jamaica, in the Caribbean. Africa, in many places, was the same. People wanting their skin to be clearer, because in a way, it's about this brainwashing that unfortunately happened in our societies, also even during colonialism and so on, whereas people really were self-hating themselves. The same apply with in a sense, I think, with hair and so on, even though that's a different conversation. People will tend to disagree even today. But people are trying to make their hair to meet a certain standard of beauty that has been portrayed. And because for the longest, European-based societies were advancing standard of beauty being as closely related to their European features, clear skin, straight hair, things of that nature. Well, but if you take a step back, as the expression goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There's actually no universal standard of beauty. That's just messaging that was crafting that was being put forth. So that continues until today. But really, here the message is, my hope, first of all, for anybody who's doing bleaching, I really hope that they wake up of it. So I'm glad to see somebody like Vybz Kartel say that, because for somebody like him who is so popular in terms of dance hall, but just reggae music in general, it is good when I see statements like this, because obviously celebrities are influential, whether it's through social media. We know they have a huge following. So I rejoice when I see things like that, because we need opinion leaders and so on, influential people, influencers, to wake up to realities like that and really just advance that message that your skin is beautiful the way you're made. Whether your skin is black, brown, whatever color it is, it's beautiful. You don't have to alter that to try to meet a certain standard to be as close, say, to European or white standard as possible. No. Black is beautiful, just as white is beautiful, just as Asian, even though Asian is not a skin color, but Asian is beautiful. So whatever your ethnicity, whatever your skin color, God has made you that way. You are beautiful the way you are. We need to instill that into our kids. So all this bleaching so now some people do it for health purposes. Like Michael Jackson, many people will say, I mean, at least he used the excuse, I don't know if it's true or not, because of the skin condition that he had. Maybe. If you do it for medical reasons, that's a different ballgame. But in terms of just cosmetic and beautiful standards, granted, this is a free world. Nobody will mandate what you should do with your own body. But I would hope that Black people would absolutely stop bleaching their skin for beauty standards. Because again, your skin is beautiful. Black is beautiful. even if you're of a dark complexion, of some of the darkest complexion. Like for example, I think if you look at the African continent, right, you'd see a lot of people maybe from the Nile, what we call Nilotics, towards whether it's Sudan, uh, some places in northeastern Congo, for example, like people along the Nile, they have a very dark skin, but typically people from Sudan, Dinkas, that's a tribe in Sudan, would have maybe a darker complexion skin than other, ethnic groups or tribal groups. You also look at, I've seen a lot of people in West Africa going places like Senegal and things of that nature that would have dark skin, even though you'll see that across Africa anyways. But the point here is that that doesn't make you any less beautiful than somebody who has a lighter skin. So we need to stop that. And so it behooves, I think, influencers and entertainers and so on to use their platforms to really pass messages like the one Vybz Kartel just passed. All right, let's stop this bleaching nonsense. And then when it comes to cancer and things of that nature, I'm sure it has long-term impact, anyways, in terms of like skin cancer and things of that nature. But in terms of standard of beauty, our kids need to be taught from a young age that if your skin is beautiful the way it is, you have a black skin, you're beautiful. All right, you're a black woman, your hair is beautiful. It's don't just try to compromise and accept standard that is being imposed, whether it's but I'm glad to see that even in movies and Hollywood and so on, there has been a concerted effort, I think, to diversify the uh, offerings of actors and things of that nature, even though that's still a lot of work to be done. But the more kids can see people that look like them, elevated in places like that and adulated, then the less they will feel the pressure to try to conform to some beauty standard that forces them to hate their nature, like for example, dark skin color, and try to adopt another one. So really, we need to continue that. Even though I also know in places like I know for a fact places like in some Asian places, India, the darker your skin, there's still a lot of stigma associated with skin color, which is unfortunate. But all that, hopefully will change over time. So there you have it. So that was uh, Vybz Kartel. Moving on to still the Caribbean, let's look at Haiti. There was a statement that was made because in Haiti the situation just continues to be degraded. And so, as we've talked about it in the past, how gangs are just proliferating. Well, there's a coalition of gangs in Haiti called Vivansam. Well, they're threatening to take over the island because if you look at Port-au-Prince, the capital, for example, they're saying that gangs have taken maybe over 90% of the place. And not only that, they've taken places that even are far off away from the capital. For example, there's the city of Mirebalais, which is in central Haiti, which was just taken over by gangs. And so there's a statement that was just issued by the United States Department. So here's the statement that was that was made. The following discussions between the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary of State with Prime Minister of Barbados and Chairman of the Caribbean Community, Mia Motley, the United States supports the statement by CARICOM condemning any action to destabilize Haiti's Transitional Presidential Council. The United States supports the effort by the Kenya-led Multinational Security Support Mission and CARICOM to assist the government in its effort to bring peace and stability to Haiti in the face of armed criminal gangs. The United States continues to consult with governments across the region. A few key elements here. One, you're seeing that there's a Kenya-led multinational security support mission. So the United Nations, if you're not familiar with this, usually they will send peacekeeping forces and so on in different conflict areas. Well, in Haiti, the peace effort, the police force is essentially agents from Kenya. So the country of Kenya and East Africa is the one leading at least a peace quote unquote effort in Haiti. So to me, that's that's good in a sense, because Kenya being in Africa, Haiti is in the Caribbean, but we have an African country that is involved in a not a global pack nation. This talks this goes in the direction of the unity that I always like to speak about, even though here it's under the impulse of the UN, which is not necessarily an organization I'm a big fan of, but nevertheless, seeing Kenyans trying to advance peace is positive. The other part here is that I talked about CARICOM. So Mia Mottley, who is the current Prime Minister of Barbados, but she's also the chairman of CARICOM. So CARICOM is the Caribbean community, right? So it's the organization that englobes about 15 different Caribbean nations. So it's the body that tries to have regional responses and address issues in the Caribbean in one voice. So the CARICOM, I'm also a big fan of that. With all of its imperfections, it's the same as the African Union, a lot of imperfections, but at least there is a framework that can be refined to eventually get to the point where all these regions can really unify in a very efficient way. So the framework is there for more unity going down the line. So yeah, so there you have it. But I mean, I don't necessarily foresee the U.S. with the Trump administration, the America First policy to really be actively involved in the Caribbean. I might be surprised, but I just don't rely a lot on the U.S. to do a lot to significantly alter the situation in Haiti. But the situation is really bad, really bad. A lot of deaths. And these gangs, as I say, they came together, formed a criminal coalition called Viva Ensemble. And they have weapons, they're organized, they have military style operations. So the situation is dire. And it is my hope that, eventually we can solve the situation. On that note, I did an interview. I've announced it over a month ago. We had a first interview with a brother from Haiti. Our first interview, unfortunately, as I had announced, we had technical problem. We totally lost that file. So we did a second one, and we've been working through some audio situation in the editing, but it should come on the channel soon. And he had a lot of great insight on the situation in Haiti. So I can't wait to post it on this channel. So make sure you subscribe, by the way, and hit the bell so that as we post new videos, because that interview is coming, it's already recorded, it's being edited. So once we post it, so you'll be able to see that. That will teach you a lot about Haiti, and you might gain new perspective about Haiti. All right, so our last story here, let me look at the time. So we've been going for 33 minutes. Okay, I'll try to not be too long here. So the last story comes from Jamaica. So Jamaica, Andrew Holness, who is the Prime Minister of Jamaica, so His Excellency Andrew Holness. So in his continued statements, trying to calm the situation with all the Trump tariffs. Now there is a pause. Trump lowered the tariffs, but there's a 10% base across all the nations, China being an exception here. Well, Andrew Holness issued some interesting statement in his continued attempt to find solutions here. So here are some of the statements he made. All right. So here, for example, he was addressing the producers in Jamaica. So he said the following, quote, "So, to our manufacturers and exporters, we understand the uncertainty this announcement has created, and we are with you every step of the way. You are not only an integral part of our economic strategy, but you are also a national champion of our resilience and ingenuity." End quote. So really trying to support the exporters and manufacturers, trying to give them hope, saying that he's with them, at least the government is with them every step of the way. And so he conclude, this is really, I think, something that was very, very interesting to me. So here's what he said. He says, "My business people, before you start to look at the negative, also look at the opportunities. Don't just sit down and say, complain about all the things that are going on and all the things that are going bad, expecting that the government is going to solve all the problems for you. Be the entrepreneur, be the one who is the risk taker, be the one who is looking for opportunities. So, the theme here of turning this adverse situation into opportunity is the same theme. If you've been following this platform, that's the same theme I've been advancing. The America First approach of Donald Trump's government is creating gaps across the world, including the global PAC. And so those are opportunities. So government as well as businesses, whether it's small scale entrepreneurs, small and medium enterprises, or bigger business entities in the global PAC, need to really change a paradigm here. If the US markets are being closed off and America is disengaging, use that as a way to find different partnerships, different way of doing business. I tell you, China is not slipping. China with its almost 500 billion worth of merchandise was already implanted in many different countries, but is looking at different ways to sell its merchandise in other markets. And so tomorrow, if the situation normalizes between the US and other nations, well, the nations that were already proactive in strengthening themselves in different ways will actually become stronger when it comes to relationships and negotiation with the US. So this is really, I like this theme of looking at these challenges as an opportunity. You need to be ambitious and say, you know what? The US is clearly the biggest market in the world, the biggest consumer market in the world. It's the biggest economy. That's a given. We understand that. If the US is closing off itself and Donald Trump is disengaging, that opens up the door to look at different places to strengthen yourself. So that is the mindset that should be adopted across the global PAC. So, all right. So we're done with the Caribbean, and I'm gonna rush and just finish very quickly with. Let's move on now to Africa. All right, the motherland. I'm gonna start with Gabon. Well, in Gabon, if you followed the news, there was an election, right? Obviously, with let me see here. All right, so General Brice Oligui Ngema, he came into power. He had a military coup, and he overthrew the president of the government of Ali Bongo, who was of the Bongo family that had been leading the country for over 67 years. So he came in a military coup, and bam, he says, you know what? Initially, as this military a lot of times do this coup d'etat, they will come and say, okay, I'll only keep power for a certain amount of time, then I will organize elections and will give the power to civilians. Well, in this case, he himself presented himself in the election. Unfortunately, as is often the case in many of these elections, there are many opposition leaders that were barred from even participating in this election. And he ends up winning the presidency with 90% of the vote, with a turnout to be like over 70%. Those are the numbers that are presented. So, okay, I guess some might say democracy has prevailed. This just, to me, highlights something I often said in terms of this democratic system in some of the societies that might not be ready. Because clearly, I mean, when you have situations like this, on paper, I guess an election has happened, but we've seen it across the board, even in countries like Rwanda, where you have a president winning in like 99% of the the ballots and so on of the votes. I just look forward, for Africa to really meet its potential, because it has been well established. I've talked to it of it ad nauseum. We understand that Africa is such a wealthy continent when it comes to its natural resource, a potentially wealthy continent. Even just Gabon, it is a very rich country in terms of its timber, in terms of its oil. It's an oil producing nation. Uh, but without real institution over time, it'll be hard for Africa to maximize its potential. But getting to strong institution and great governance, it's something that will take time, given where Africa is today. That's just a reality I'm very cognizant of. Set up like the civic infrastructure so that we have a representative democracy, or we have representative democracies across the board that actually work for the well-being of nations, of continents. There's a lot of work to be done, but that's where we'll need to get to if we really want that continent to meet its potential. But we need that ambition, and I'm a very ambitious person, and I believe that will eventually happen. But the reality is that, man, there's a lot of work to be done. All right, moving on from Gabon, let's go to the Maghreb country of Algeria. Maghreb being, North Africa, above the Sahara. Well, there's massive tensions happening right now between France and Algeria. Some big diplomatic tensions, because on one end, Algeria decides to expel 12 officials from the French embassy, and this happens after last week. France, I believe it was on Friday, France accused some Algerian officials, and they accused them of kidnapping this influencer last year. There was an influencer called let me get the name right. Let me see here. Give me one second. I don't want to mispronounce his name. So his influential name, or influencer name, is Amir DZ. So the letter D and the letter Z. Amir DZ. That's his influencer name, and his real name was Amir Boukhors. So he was abducted essentially in France, and he was a dissident. He was somebody who was speaking very harshly against the Algerian government, and so his name was Amir Boukhors. He was 41 years old, and so the French government, led by Jean-Noël Barrot, essentially accused the Algerian government of being involved with his abduction. And so, as a response, Algeria retaliated by expulsing 12 French embassy staff. So, this is an escalation. We're all watching to see what the situation, what will eventually unfold. There's discussions, obviously, between Algeria and France. Are they trying to solve this? Emmanuel Macron's government is issuing statements, so there's negotiation behind closed doors. But we're closely watching, because this is another instance of really, people are calling it an anti-French sentiment. Even though I disagree, I don't think in Africa there's an anti-French sentiment. So like, Africans are not against French people, but there's certainly an anti-French government stance in terms of the historical nature of the French government, right? With some of the colonialism and some of the negative things that happened in the past. So there's a lot of tension there. You have countries like of the AES, which was Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, for example, that definitely expelled French troops a while ago. And there's diplomatic tensions there. So yeah, so there's an interesting dynamic happening across the continent when it comes to some African government and French. There's definitely a shift. People want to walk away from French involvement, influence in their government. So that is what's happening in Algeria. So 12 French staff were expelled. Okay, so I'm going to finish with South Africa. And I'm just going to go very fast because just looking at the time, we've been around for 44 minutes now. So in South Africa, the government of Cyril Ramaphosa, right? So the president of South Africa has named a new envoy to the United States. His name is Msebisi Jonas Msebisi. And this happened after, as you recall, we had mentioned it also, where the U.S. government had expelled South Africa's ambassador. The ambassador was Mr. Ibrahim Rasool, was expelled, and so now Msebisi Jonas has been sent as an envoy. This is an interesting development. First of all, what happened with the ambassador, with Mr. Ibrahim Rasool? Well, he had made statement during there was a webinar, there was a session where he accused Donald Trump's government of wanting to highlight white supremacy, of some elements within the government being worried that white people are eventually becoming the minority in the U.S. and they're doing everything possible to fight that off and maintain the supremacy of white people in the United States. So as he made all those statements, obviously it erupted, and so the Trump government, also led by Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, who would be like the Foreign Affairs Minister, issued a statement saying that the South African ambassador was persona non grata, so he was no longer welcome to the U.S. So he was expelled. And Ibrahim Rasool was saying, sure, I mean, he packed his stuff and he was like, he's leaving, no issues there. This is actually somebody who had been an activist for many, many years. He was a staunch anti-apartheid activist. So he is of Indian ethnicity, because in South Africa you've had Indian going over a century ago. So he is of Indian descent, but he's South African. And so during apartheid, you had black people and then you had colored. So people that would be more mixed, lighter, complexion. So he would be classified as colored during the apartheid. And so he was an activist. So he's somebody who's fought for a long time against all these inequalities. He's very sensitive to that. So seeing, some of the climates in the U.S. with Donald Trump coming back to power, but also with all these anti-diversity measures, with like all these attacks going on against many minorities, immigrant communities, but also, more importantly, seeing the policy that was being advanced by organizations like AfriForum and so on, that were falsely claiming that white people in South Africa were facing genocide or were being persecuted because of the land situation, as we talked about during one of the previous shows, where you have in South Africa a situation where you have a very small minority, all right, because the white population in South Africa is a small minority of like maybe 12% or so, but owning over 3/4 of the agricultural land, going back from the apartheid time and even colonialism. That's a massive inequality. And so that is something that persists till this day. So white South Africans are still very privileged in South Africa to still control most of the economy and so on. And so definitely no persecution of white people in South Africa. And so you have this ambassador who was in the middle of that. He's seeing Donald Trump with Elon Musk in his ear, and with people like from the PayPal mafia, with Peter Thiel and so on, in Donald Trump's ear, enacting policies like saying that, okay, we will open the refugee program only for white South Africans because they're persecuted, and so we'll welcome white South African refugees in the United States. So in the midst of all that, you can only understand how the representative of the South African government, the ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, was very I would say unhappy with all these statements made by the Trump administration, which were clearly false, because white South Africans are not being persecuted in South Africa. Absolutely false. Whereas I even mentioned last week, you even have things that, till this day, there's many things that irk me, but there's this concept in South Africa of the city of Orania. I've mentioned it before. I try not to be emotional about these things, but you have to understand Orania is a city in South Africa where you have white people created this city and black people are not allowed to live there. and this is a city created by descendant of Afrikaners. So people call Afrikaners, so descendants of mostly Dutch colonizers and British and French and so on. So nobody is disputing that they're not South African, which they are. You know, their ancestors came years ago, and fine, they're fully fledged South African. Nobody will dispute that. But going to the point of creating an enclave or a city where black people are not allowed in that country, to me, that's one thing that's just hard for me to fathom. And now you have people even going as far as saying that, well, they want to secede and they want to create their own country, right? Aside from South Africa there. And so my mindset is, look, if you're so hell-bent on creating your white country, your white supremacy country where black people are not allowed, that will never happen within South Africa. And the South African government should never allow something like that to happen. But if you're so hell-bent on doing that, get on the boats, go find an island that is unoccupied, away from the African continent, and create your country there in an uninhabited island away from South Africa, and go create your white heaven over there. Because that is absolutely absurd. Wanting to create a country within South Africa where black people will not even be allowed to live in. And I would not even say, go back to Europe, as some people say. No, that is also ludicrous. That is stupid. Because people that came over centuries ago, are essentially, they're not European anymore. They're Africans. So I fully embrace white South African. As African people, I have no issue with that. The issue is to have some of these white South Africans wanting to, first of all, creating cities, a city, Orania, where black people are not allowed to live. To me, I have a big problem with that. And then some wanting to advance a recognition for them as a state and wanting to create a different state, a different country. Like, absolutely not. I mean, imagine, again, black people in France, in some European country or something, over time creating an enclave and saying you will create a city where only black people here in France are allowed to live and white French people are not allowed to come and live. That is just totally absurd. Even whether you bring the argument saying, well, it's different because, you don't have black people in France that came centuries ago to build blah, blah, blah. That's beside the point. The point is having these people wanting to, and I'm really employing these people on purpose here, because if you're white South African who wants to separate from black South African who do not want black South African to live there, that is a big problem. I will always have a problem with that. Let's be clear. I believe in unity. To me, all people should be able to live together regardless of your skin color, regardless of your ethnicity. So I just cannot fathom a city like that within Africa where you're not allowing black people to live. It's just, there's different realities in that country. I get it. Where I think based on the constitution, the government cannot just come and disband such a place, which is even why they had allowed them over 30 years ago to start building this piece of land, which is in a desert, is in a place on the Western Cape. It's a bit away from the city. I get all of that. So they worked hard to build it, sure. But still, the principle of having a white-only city in South Africa is criminal in my eyes with regards to the unity agenda that we all have. Yeah, that I just don't understand that. Anyways, so I'll end up here for today with our show. And since we ended with South Africa, I will end up with a quote. As you know, it has become our tradition to end all of our shows with a quote. And the quote here today is from Nelson Madiba Mandela. All right. So here the quote by Mandela says, "There is no passion to be found playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living." Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. There's no point in playing small. We're capable of many great things. Humans in general are capable of great things if they set their mind to it. I mean, humanity has proved it. And also, Black people, the Global Pack, understand we're capable of doing great things. This platform, I believe, will accomplish great outcomes. I'm very ambitious about that. I'm very passionate about that. We'll create bridges, coalition across the Global Pack. We'll elevate Global Pack communities. Oh, that is the ambition. I will never relinquish on that. There's really no point in playing small ball. So I encourage you, wherever you are, whether it's a business you're pursuing, whether it's an organization you're growing, whether it's whatever it is you're pursuing, I mean, have big ambition and set up a plan, pursue it, and believe that you will get it because you're capable of great things. I firmly believe that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so let me end up here for today. Thank you very much again for tuning in today. For those of you who have not done it, let me ask you to just take the time. It only takes a few seconds to click on the subscribe button to help this platform grow, become part of the conversation so that together we can reach the goals we've set for ourselves for 2025. But without you, we cannot do it. So thank you very much. And also remember, set your calendar again. Very exciting announcement that I made when we began the show. On Friday, this Friday, which will be April 18, we're beginning our new business series where I will share steps, a proven formula that are being taught in some of the best MBA programs in the world to help anybody transform an idea into a very successful business. So mark your calendars. Starting this Friday, it's a series. So make sure you tune in on that day. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do that so that you will get a notification when we upload new videos, because that will be a very instrumental series. And that will go in the direction of a solution, right? Because, this platform is not just about complaining, as I said, but it's about advancing, offering solutions. So that right there is a solution to help those of you that might be struggling, that might have great idea, but not sure how to transform those ideas into successful businesses. We will cover that starting this Friday. So I hope many of you will tune in. Send me your comments. Let me know what you think. If you want something particular to be covered in business, I believe we can definitely cover that as well. But this series, which will be once a week, every Friday, starting this Friday, I know will be very transformational, and we help a lot of you really start new thriving businesses. So there you have it. Thank you very much. Until next time, peace be with you. Asante sana, which means thank you very much in Swahili. Remember, we are a beautiful people. We're a strong people. We're very capable people. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. And until next time, remember, we are the Global Pack. So thank you very much and see you next time.